Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to today's Biome seminar. My name is Nandini and I'm a second year MEM and a student committee member for Biomes. For those of you who are new here, Biomes is a weekly seminar at the school. And like most things at YSE, it is an acronym for Bridging Issues and Optimizing Methods in Environmental Studies. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Tami Bond. Dr. Bond is the Walter Scott Jr. Presidential Chair in Energy, Environment, and Health at Colorado State University. Her research has followed a thread from combustion to atmospheric chemistry and climate to technology change in future scenarios to the intimate relationship between technology and human choice. Her work spans considerations as small as a particle's skin and as large as national transportation system in the quest to characterize the dance between humans, their energy use, and the atmosphere and climate. Dr. Bond first earned 2 degrees in mechanical engineering before succumbing to an interdisciplinary PhD and pursuing an NOAA, Climate and Global Change postdoc. She joined CSU in 2019 after 16 years in civil and environmental engineering at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. She is a fellow of American Geophysical Union and a 2014 John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bond.
Hi, can you hear me? Are we on? Good. Okay, well, there's an amazing number of empty seats in the front, so scoot up. There's people standing in the back. The front does not have to be empty. I know it is very uncomfortable because then I might look at you. So what's in my talk? Yeah, do it. Come on, I'm gonna wait. Really, seriously, I'm gonna wait. Nobody will move. Yes, do it. Spread out. You don't need to be crowded in back. Come, claim the space. Oh yeah, look at that. It feels so much better for me. And if by chance you're sitting in the back because you have a class right after this and you have to leave, I won't be offended if you get up and leave. I know everybody is super busy. And so that is fine. I understand. I teach, right? So I see people leaving all the time. That's fine. So what's in my talk is a couple of things. I'm going to start with a positionality statement. How many of you have had to write a positionality statement? Stand up if you have, even if you are eating pizza. Yeah. Yay. So, and mine probably won't be very good, right? Where I stand, how I got here, and all that stuff. I'm going to do a tiny little bit on what I think of as heterogeneous transitions, and then I'm going to talk more on how activation toward those transitions occurs. So the number one thing in my current position today is that just when I finished my last deadline, and then it became time to work on this talk, which was last Wednesday, my computer decided to be non-functional. And so just because of the way things went and its transition through the Apple Store, it doesn't behave even now. And one of the things I cannot do is detail. Like my stock in trade is detailed, like tiny little numbers and little pictures that turn and spin and add to each other. And I couldn't do any of it. And I was unfortunately had to be, or chose to be on the Cape this weekend. And so all I could do was have a computer that didn't work for what I usually do and think about what am I going to tell these people when I can't use my usual tools. I was like, holy cow. Uh-oh. And given the thing that I want to talk to you about, it was pretty ironic because the laptop and defined my sense of functionality, right? Like this is what gives me authority. Like these people are coming to have me dump numbers upon them, and I can't. They're gonna be I don't know. What are they going to be? And so that got into, well, what do I think your expectation is of me? Right. All this while I have a view like this. This is awesome. So I'm just curious. Talk to your neighbor, unless your mouth is full. What is your expectation when you come to a talk like this? Do you really want numbers dumped upon you? So let me hear from just a couple of people. I won't have a chance to capture everybody, but maybe somebody on this side, did something come up for you that you're willing to share with the group? Yeah.
You said that numbers can be good, but we want numbers that tell a story. We want that
You want a narrative framing. Okay, well, I've got no narrative and no numbers, so yeah, and somebody from this side? I'm trying not to look at anyone in particular. Yes. Storytelling, learning, new perspective. Well, so I hope I can trigger some of that, even without numbers. I've got a little story, and so I hope that's okay. Like I hope it's okay. So other parts of my position are I've experienced both privilege and marginalization, far more privilege than marginalization, or I wouldn't be standing here. And for which I'm very grateful. And yet those elements where I felt marginalized have been a really key piece of why I do what I do. Because it's hard to forget, right? It's hard to say, what if it's not like that for everyone, including me? And one of the pieces of my marginalized past is that I actually spent a year at Yale. I was 17, very immature, and I was freaking broke. Like, my parents sent me with no cash spending money. And this is not an environment that you come into that with, right? Especially the undergrads. And so just seeing how I failed to navigate that and how difficult it was when I knew none of the codes makes me think about what it's like for other people to navigate with none of the codes. I grew up in Southern California. That's a part of my past. And so air quality and the atmosphere has, for some reason, always been my thing. There were many people who lived there and who had no play days, right? There were seriously ozone alerts, do not go outside. And so somehow I've never been able to get out of air quality. And so air quality in its various forms and climate and the emissions that we create has always been kind of my good thing. Like, that's what I think is really important. That's what I'm seeking. That's where I want to make a difference. And so I want to ask you all, participation time. What's your good thing? Why are you here? What are you chasing? Talk to your neighbor. I can't help it. I teach sophomores. I got to do this. Okay, I'm just going to ask for some shout outs. Like, I'll point in a general direction, and somebody stand up and just shout out what it is. So, and I'll try not to pick people who are eating right at the moment. So, how about you? Yeah, you. That's okay. Communication. Yeah, because that's really important, right? Yeah. Okay. What about you?
Making big energy projects more inclusive, economic, and social.
Wow, big energy projects, inclusion, amazing. What about you, sir, in the blue shirt, hoping that you're not going to be called on? Yes, you. What's your good thing? To learn. Learning is also a good thing. Yeah. What about you?
Water quality.
Water quality, good thing too, right? Yeah. Look, man, look at all this good stuff. But what? Eating. That's a great way to get out of it. Okay. What about you? Public opposition to clean energy projects. So studying that tension. Yeah. Anyone else just feel like you want to shout out what your good thing is? Love to hear it. Okay, so for a lot of years, this is what I did to get tenure and all that stuff. I studied black carbon, which is this stuff that you can see rising from a flame that is imperfect, and so it can't consume all those little particles. And actually, that orange glow stuff that you see is those little particles glowing, radiating, those teeny little particles. And so this eventually got sort of political because black carbon or little particles wash out of the air about a week after they're in. And so people were saying, hey, if we removed all those particles or reduced the emissions, we would reduce climate warming very fast. And so I did that for a long time. And I wrote a huge paper that integrated all the mechanisms and considered all the things. And I'm not going to talk about that because it has a lot of numbers. And I can share those numbers with you if you are at lunch or dinner with me. So that's great. But after, I got into this in 2000. So some of you were maybe like not even born, right? And there were great ideas. And this paper came out in 2013, and it is now 2025. And after a while, I was saying, this thing that we could do to make change in a week, which sounds super awesome, is not limited by how long this stuff stays in the atmosphere. Because 20 years later, we're still talking about it. What's the thing that changes slowly is people and people's systems and people's attitudes and the longevity of our technology and the fact that we don't want to give up practice. And so then I started thinking about people, which was really terrible because I was trained as an engineer. And I am going to talk about people. And for those of you who think about people who have skills in that, I'm going to do it really badly. But I'm going to do it anyway, because my question is, there are many things that are good. And there are many things that we should do quickly because they affect people's well-being and health and our climate and our environment and all of that stuff that you know very well. But my question is, how quickly can we go and how quickly should we go? So I'm going to do a little bit of quantitative. Oh, no, first I'm going to do this. This is a figure from the IPCC summary for policymakers. And what I want you to do is grasp it all in the next 30 seconds. No. What I want you to do is look at it for 30 seconds and tell me what you gravitate to later. Okay, so one thing I'm really bad at is remembering who I called on. But how about folks in front? What do you notice first? What do you gravitate to in this figure? Just quick. Complex. Yeah. Okay. What about anyone in the back row here? Fork in the road. So there's some forks. Okay. What do you gravitate 2. Lower left, poverty, inequity, and justice. Yeah. What about you? Conditions that in feasibility, right. Okay. Lady in green. The shocks. Yeah, so there's a lot going on there. And so a lot of people, I think, are working on those transitions. And I was working on those transitions too. And this stuff over on the left, it's like, yeah, there's all this stuff. That's what makes that happen, right? And I was turning engineering cranks and numbers, and at some point I said that's not where it's at. I mean, yes, we need that stuff. We need to know if we're going in the right direction. We need to know how quickly we can move. But there's all this stuff, and that's what I'm going to talk about for some of this talk. So this is the one quantitative slide. This is what I'm working on with Dr. Rao here. And so one of the things I look at is electrification in the United States, people making changes in their homes. And he came up with a 2-stage decision model, and then I made it more complex because complexity is good and gives us jobs. And the questions are, 1, do I need to make a change? You don't even enter that decision space of electrifying your home until it comes up for you. And so it might be a policy, or it might be a repair need, but it doesn't come up. And that's kind of what the rest of my talk is going to be about. Number 2 is, what are my options? This is a part that we totally miss. Well, we don't totally miss. Y'all are probably working on it. But in all the climate scenarios, there's a whole lot about which one will I choose, and very little about getting into stage 1 and what are you offered as options. So I'm not even going to talk about number 2, but I am going to talk about number 1. How do you get into the space where you're thinking about bringing that change into your life? Okay, how do you open the door? What is the change? You don't have to tell me this one, I won't call on anybody, but what is the most important thing you're doing in your life right now? I mean, besides your degree, your advisor's not listening, but what's the most important thing you're doing for positive change in your life? Just think about that. Okay, is it on the list that people said? How does it align with what people said, right? So the rest of my story is going to be about Nepal. Some of these pictures are blurry because that is actually the resolution I have them at. So I've worked in Nepal for a pretty long time, and one of the things I did with regard to household energy was about looking at cooking stoves, which is, I can go into the health statistics, but one of the greatest burdens of disease on humans primarily affects women and children. And so I did a lot of time measuring emissions. I set up a testing lab. That's the blurry one. Trained people in capacity building. And after doing that for a while, I noticed a similar thing. My goodness, it's all about the people. The pace of change is all about the people in the institutions. And that was hard for me as an engineer because, we all want to be effective, right? So I'm going to go through a series of what we did, and I'm trying to write this up, and it's hard. I'm calling it a consecutive critical case study. So the first thing that happened is I had reached a point in my career where I was modeling a lot, and I just wanted to be in the field, and I just wanted to see real people. And so I paid somebody to take me out to the field and listen to people talk about their energy. And I happened to be in this building where a group of women happened to be gathering. And that conversation, although I cannot understand Nepali or any of the dialects, that conversation was so lively. And they were like, yes, yes, energy. And they spoke about their ambitions. And even if I was there, and then a man walked into the room and everything went quiet. And I'm not saying men are bad. Look, I don't want to do that thing, but you have to acknowledge that there's a power dynamic in many cultures where you create a power distance between people and the conversation stops. Where there are so many ideas, how do we tap that? So that became my question. How do we tap that and how do we integrate that? Because remember, if we want to make change, every single one of those people is going to have to adopt, embrace, and so on. How do we tap that liveliness, the joy that you feel when you're doing something new, rather than the tedium of having it imposed? So there's a whole body of literature on extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation and how intrinsic tends to go a lot better, right? So in 2017, we said, let's try to get people to just tell us what they want. Now, what do you see here? People are lining up around a table, and we didn't set that table up, right? I went with, by the way, I don't do this myself. I have Nepalese colleagues who are wonderful. They work at NGOs, so they're placed. And they routinely work with these communities. And so they said, oh, let's talk about what kind of energy you would want. People came and set themselves up this way. And we said, well, what would you want? And they were like, if you're the expert, if you don't know what I want, why are you here? That's your job, is to tell me what I want. What's the point of you, right? And so the interesting thing is that when experts come and talk to people, that dynamic is already set up, right? Like, you're not the person who knows what you want. I am. And how do you get over that? So then we started trying to get over this, because what I really wanted, as somebody who was deep in cook stoves at the time, was to hear what people wanted so we could design a good stove that they would use. So I work with a wonderful woman at Johns Hopkins, Anita Shankar, and she does this sort of work for totally different reasons. She does work on what she calls agency-based empowerment, which is about getting people to take control of their own lives. And she typically does it in the context of entrepreneurship. And so we decided, let's do that training. Let's do her exercises before we talk about device features. And then maybe they'll feel more able to speak. We'll tell them that how important their views are and so on. And so we did this. Again, we is a bunch of people. I am the one who can stand here, but it relies on a lot of people, especially people who speak the dialect and local people who speak the local dialect. So we said, let's just train the entire village, do these agency-based exercises. So everybody who would come, we did those exercises. There's certain exercises that are sort of rooted in positive psychology and self-awareness and so on. And you know what? Like, you would think, oh, people may not respond to that, like, or who are we to train them? You know what? It works. It works. People were happy. They said after the training, and I was not there, so this is all recorded. They said, we feel good. We're really excited. We are now thinking of ourselves in a different way. And I'm like, yeah, let's hear what they want. Now let's hear what they want. And you know what? They wanted us to leave them alone. They didn't stoves. So when they could speak, it was actually really easy to get not everybody, but a critical fraction to speak. When they could speak, they didn't want us to be there in the first place. Oh. Okay, so then we tried another iteration. So one of the things we went in and overlaid the exercises on this Dutch program where people could choose, where they were already choosing and they had already signed up to choose. And so we said, let's open up the ability to speak when they are choosing. And one of the things they choose is energy. So rather than having it be this open-ended, you could talk about anything you want, and it turns out you don't want us. Okay, let's try to align a little better. So we did that. And oh my gosh, it worked again. Like they got super vocal. And you know what they wanted? They wanted, this should not be a surprise, right? We're really good at discovering things that should be really obvious. What do they want? What do you think they wanted? Do it themselves entirely? Not quite, because these were being offered. Like you can have any one of these things, right? So guess what they wanted? Anything that would make cash income, right? Anything that would make cash income. So they would buy stoves if they could lead to a product, including, by the way, giant vats of alcohol. They would, so that's what people wanted. And I'd been involved in stove standards for years, and it was always like, oh no, you have to make the little stove. You have to boil 1 pot of water. That's how we compare stoves. They only wanted stoves that got big. Okay. So again, it works to engage people and to open up dialogue. It's not simple, but it's not impossible. But then the dialogue becomes, they didn't actually aspire to your good thing. And so there you are, holding the good thing, whatever it is. That's what you have. That's what you have funding for. That's what your agency does. And that individual does not aspire to that thing. In fact, very few of them do. So, yeah, okay. So the idea of my colleagues was then brilliant. So it turned out that just coincidentally, Nepal had a change in government. They devolved a lot of power down to the local levels, and including energy decisions that came at the municipality level. They're just coincidence. And they instituted a quota of like, you have to have so many women and you have to have so many underrepresented minorities. I know the things that you can't do in this environment here. Okay, so they did that, but you know what we heard? Well, yeah, we have a quota, but those people don't talk. Oh, okay. Well, let's do the agency-based training. And then what we heard was like, wow, these women won't shut up. Right? And so they began speaking in the places where they were, but it was a combination of the institution had to ask for their voices and they had to feel like they could speak. And they had to feel like they deserved to speak. And that's a big deal. It's even a big deal here. And that's why I was kind of feeling weird about this presentation, because I'm like, dang, here I'm talking about power and I'm going to be the one on the stage and all these people in the audience, you know, I'm going to be talking at them, right? I'm doing the same darn thing that we don't want to happen. Okay. And so we've done a couple rounds of this and they have a little video about it, but basically not everybody takes it up. But when they do, they become a voice for their community. but it takes those two things. At least it takes a space for those people to be invited to the dialogue, and then it takes some provocation or invitation for those for folks to speak where they have never spoken before. The third thing, actually, which we haven't fixed yet and is really embedded, is that people need to listen. Work on that later. There's a ton of work on empowerment, going back many, many years, talking about what empowerment is. There's an awful lot of empowerment. Yes, we do empowerment because we talk to people, but not really working on this question of opening up access to decision making. It must also include the processes that lead people to perceive themselves as able and entitled. And those of you who work with communities are probably very well aware of this, but I'm really interested in it. In addition to inclusion, I'm interested in it as what does it take to enter that gate? When we see a better future for everybody, it's not just a matter of creating numbers and making it easy from the outside. It's also an invitation within. So getting back to this three-stage decision model, not just do I need to make a change, but do I need to make a change in that? So we had energy, water, I don't remember all the good things. People are working on very good things, and you yourself are working on one or two things for yourself. How do you get them to align? Right? How do you get people to go through all the doors at once? Because they can't. Like, yeah, I'm gonna do. It turns out that when you ask people to take on their agency, they do, and they choose their own pursuit, not yours. That is the first step. That's one of the things that makes people human, is their own ability to choose. And it's that flourishing, that interior flourishing and embracing, that makes, that provides the conditions whereby good things can flourish, right? Ownership, capacity, all those things. If you have already squashed it out of people, it won't flourish. And so how do you introduce things that are good for everyone without squashing the flower? I don't know. Okay, so many of us have a path. Like, this is the nature of research. I see something in the distance, I see the path to it, I'm gonna work really hard, I put a lot of energy into it, really wonderful energy, and that's your thing. And then you say, well, look at all the things we want to do. How many things can you hold in your mind? Yeah. There's kind of argument in the attention literature, but it's a number between 1 and 3. And so, what? Well, maybe for you, but it's a number between 1 and 3. So how do we get people to go through all the doors that lead to all the good things? And by the way, we are those people, right? We're the people that also need to do it. How many of you have bought an electric car? No car? Yeah. How many of you have a car that isn't an electric? Me. Yeah, because I have a 13-year-old car and I'm not buying a new one until it's, until it, anyway, I'm not going to invest in the resources kind of thing. So we don't, so this might sound a little bit hopeless, like, oh my God, nobody can do everything at once. So this is though what I call power and the public health paradox. Think about all the privilege that you have had to get to where you could contemplate clean water, clean energy, entrepreneurship, community involvement, how removed you had to get from your immediate circumstances where you're hungry, you can't pay the bills, you just want to send your kids to school. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about that. What let you be there? I mean, dang, right? And so you know that not everybody is there, and you still want them to walk through that door when their motivation and their attention are driving them to something else. And that's the paradox we have to overcome if we're going to bring good things to the world. Some of it's about making it easy. Some of it's about bundling. I don't know all the answers, but that's the tension that I'm trying to live in, that we can see things because of our privilege that would be useful, but somehow we have to introduce those things without denying and steamrolling the motivation that is required to keep them going. That's all I have. Thank you very much. I think questions is what we do. Oh.
So in this cook stove example in Nepal, were you able to sort of put them in this hypothetical thought exercise? Okay, everything stays the same in your life. I can't give you more income. I'm not trying to meet your priorities, but everything else equal. If I just replace the stove with that stove and you tried it out, would you take it? Now, would you want it? Because otherwise, you're just thinking I have other priorities that are much more important, earning more money. But if everything was the same, would I take it? It's the first little step towards, okay, we understand a preference, but it's not still in the context of their lives. Is that, first of all, did you do that? Is that a useful step to move towards where we want to go?
Like, would I take it? So I think your question is, can you say, would I take this if everything else is equal? So I have a couple of very different examples. So the cook stoves are often given away, and there's a lot of psychology around why to do that or why not to do that, right? And so you can say that as an example. Do people take a free cook stove? Very often not. Or they take, everybody will accept everything and then they'll grow plants in it or whatever. And so the question is, to make a change, typically things require a value in your life. And I know that public health folks know that the value is reduced emissions, reduced COPD or whatever it is, and reduced child mortality, right? But that's part of the public health question. It's so far away unless you actually have asthma or something that you don't feel or see it. And even things that are nominally simple and free, there's still a cost to embed them into your life, especially if it requires change. There's still a cost. And so very often the answer is no. I came to this out of like a whole bunch of failed cook stove programs, right? Not being in them, but observing them. On the other hand, people love LPG. So there's a whole lot of cultural stuff. Cook stoves don't do that. They don't do this. They don't provide smoke. And then A lot of people love LPG and they will adopt it in a flash. They just can't afford it. So there's some value. It's probably huge amount convenience, right? Convenience, cleanliness. And so, and then you're competing with, do they want to, will they provide their own time and resources to that particular thing, or would they rather send their kid to school? So I don't think I answered your question, but I think that's kind of the calculus that goes on, and that's sort of what I'm interested in understanding, is like, how do we acknowledge that it's not just I'm giving you something free that you should value. I'm going to educate you that you have a problem, so you provide value. You like, your value has to be defined by my problem. So that tends to not work. I'm sorry, liquefied petroleum gas. So like propane, the cylinders that you might use for a barbecue. Yeah.
So it seems like you made this isn't about the research, more so about your career, because I'm very curious. It seems like you made a switch from kind of like a hard engineering to more of like a social science. And I'm just curious how you, I mean, you described why you made that transition, but I guess how you retrained yourself, and if the engineering skills that you built helped at all with your new research agenda.
So great question, and I don't have a good answer. So one, I still do hardcore engineering. I just didn't present it here. So I have to deliver a certain amount of bread and butter as a professor, and do the engineering skills make a difference? So again, two answers to that. One, I found that I was woefully undereducated. Like, I didn't even know what a positionality statement was, right? I was like, what is positivism, right? And so I had very little contextual training in what is knowledge. Like that's not a thing you're ever taught as an engineer. So I still feel woefully undereducated. Did the engineering skills help? I think one place where they help me is I've demanded rigor in certain definitions that that people haven't questioned. Typically, what they're just taught that, but that may be as much being an outsider as anything else. So yeah, I'm not good at it, right? I'm just thrashing, and I think that the combination of actual social science, I don't want to say social science, because it's huge, right? So there are particular things that I find very useful, and that may be only because I'm an engineer. That may be only my position.
Thank you, Dr. Bond. I have a question over here.
Yeah.
You mentioned that once the community spoke to you, they said that they didn't want you there. And so my question is whether or not, like, was there an arc of them still not wanting you there, but opening up and being appreciative, not appreciative, but like of staying there when they didn't want you there? And then, like, if they don't want you there, like, was there a reason why initially? Was it just a lack of kind of grounding? And then, like, how'd you overcome that more specifically?
Yeah, so so there's a lot of there's a lot there. So we typically work through organizations that already have somebody placed on the ground that is like a health worker or that knows that community. That doesn't mean those people are delivering exactly that thing. So it's not like they did not want me there. They did not. When we introduced stoves and we returned to the question of energy, they expressed that energy was not their priority. And so they also expressed what they did want. They wanted irrigation water. They wanted to know how to keep the monkeys out of their fields. Some people wanted to be a dancer. in this. And so they had priorities. It's just that none of them were energy. So it wasn't like, go away, we don't want to see your face. It was like, if you have only energy to offer, that's not what we want. So when we tried to respond to that, but here's where our existing structures are not great at that kind of response, right? So the first time we heard that, we said, okay, well, we feel an obligation to you. So we went and got some agricultural training. We got people to speak on agriculture. But frankly, we're not very good at that. And so the second round, where they could actually choose, people expressed that they wanted cash income. 2 people said they wanted sewing machines because that would produce cash income. Boy, is that system not set up to do something different, right? It not only could we not do that, but the Dutch program could not do that because sewing machines wasn't on their list. So then we tried to buy one and it was the wrong receipt, and then you didn't buy from the right vendor. And I mean, I could go into the stupid little details, but the fact is that the way people think about their own priorities and seek what's best for them is not aligned with how we deliver sectorally. A lot of questions over there. I love just looking around to see if I have anyone else. Yeah.
All right, hello. So that was a very interesting talk. So one question that I have is to kind of like push this further of when people have kind of different agenda or different needs, in terms of when we make a research question, have you seen or have ideas of how to kind of implement that in their research design phase of, like, in terms of public health, we think about enrolling participants, people who want to be in our study. How do we keep that percentage high? But in the research design phase, we know that people have, our participants or our community, that have other needs. If we want them in our study, how are we able to also incorporate that? So that's kind of my question. Kind of, do we have mechanism in the research design phase where we can think about that?
It's crazy, right? Because so that's I think the question that I try to grapple with. But as a researcher, in order to get a result, you're going to need to keep certain things constant, right? You can't do just everything for somebody and then go, well, I think something changed. Nobody will publish that, I can tell you. So how do you, okay, so let me go back to the last couple of rounds that we did. And I think one thing I failed to explain was when we went to the energy development subcommittees, we moved up the line to people who had chosen to be involved with energy. Like the people that were on those committees, even though they had previously been silent, had self-selected to be on the energy development subcommittee. So we brought their priority into alignment with what we had to offer. I'm not sure, and this may be too depressing, but I'm not sure you can do it at the absolute ground. I think that you may need to move up a little higher, get people who are engaged, and they also need to be trained how to engage their communities, right? And express their needs, because usually their whole course has been fighting upstream with a distance of power. And so they think that's how they're supposed to behave. I think I kind of went the long way around. I'm not sure I got your question, but something I'm struggling with is, where do you place an intervention? At what point of engagement do you place that intervention? And like public health is really hard, right? Because you want somebody to stop smoking or something, and they've got a million other things. I do not know. But I think that attention and discussion around that question, I'd love to see like a whole room full of people who are approaching that from different lenses. Okay, a non-answer answer there. Did you have a? I haven't been looking at your side of the room, so did I miss something? But you can go first.
Thank you for the very insightful talk. My question was about you mentioned people not wanting you there, but not wanting a cook stove, for example, or like that was not their priority. But I'm curious to know, after the agency-based exercise, were they able to connect to energy in terms of? But you said income was important for them. So did they have other ideas of energy which they tried to ask you about, like mills? Or you mentioned sewing machine. Was that also, did they see the energy connection there, or was it just like, how was it, did they?
Yeah, okay, so I think your question is, do they get more focused on energy? So we actually tried in the beginning with the second round, we included some exercises on what are energy services, like looking at energy as a service, and where does it appear in your life? Because a lot of people, when you say energy, they don't know what it is. They don't know what you're talking about, even though they experience those things. And so I was hoping that that more would come out. Even from the first training on, we also tried to talk about their health and how they feel and how that was valuable, and then make the connection to smoke. But it still didn't come up as priority. So we tried to do some education, but it was still like, I just want cash. And if you look at how people make decisions, they decide, right? They decide what's going to be next for them. Everybody has something that's next, and it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to get them off that. And it'd be hard to get you off that. Like you talk to somebody about what your good thing is. Would you want to switch? Can you just switch it? And you do water. Now you do energy, right? It doesn't just switch. And in the process of trying to switch or tell people what's important, we have to be careful to still value their contribution. And that's tough because it takes long, right? People want to go fast. Right? People want to go fast. It takes long. Yeah.
With that concept of the influences on individual decision making, I can't help but think about how that's been influenced and corrupted in the US with a lot of media companies, and thinking about like small town America, that they really want jobs, they want economic growth, and that's so reasonable and their priority in their lives, but then how they get that is often like doesn't actually benefit them in terms of, I can't help but think of data centers. Learning a lot about them recently.
Yes.
But like it seems like I am an altruistic person. I want people to have agency, but it seems like a lot of times we don't care, we're gonna squash the flowers because we
Yes.
get what we want.
Yes.
Talent that aligns with their values. How do you balance that when you are trying to do something good for someone?
That is a great. That is a good.
They have been I believe that they are still getting what they want.
So
That is like
yes.
huge question.
Yes. Oh my God, how much time do you have? Not enough beer in the world. So yeah, I'm happy to talk. Like, I'm going to the thing after this, but I'm also free after that if people want to talk, because I just want people who are thinking about it, right? I don't have answers. Okay. Specific thoughts that came to mind about your question though is yes, that we want to foster self-determination, and yet look what it leads to, is what a lot of people will say, like, well, I don't know if you want them making the decisions, right? Because people people don't know how to inform themselves. And so that's where I feel this tension with public health. I've heard people like community advocates say, I will never do anything that the community doesn't ask for, right? There's a strain of thought that leads to that. I will never do something that the community doesn't ask for. But we know there's a lot of stuff that you would not come up with on your own, that you can't sense from first principles in front of you. Like I also didn't discover gravity, right? I just believe Newton. And so how do you allow for priority and self-determination and yet recognize that there is a body of knowledge that is available and must be accessed through some kind of advanced detection, right? And I think it's that, like, also we don't know how to navigate the world we have with regard to information. That we know that's a problem, right? I don't know. I don't have any answers for you there, except for all kinds of fantasies that are probably not going to happen. But I think that living in that tension and acknowledging that tension between self-determination and yet accessing what the so-called, you know, experts provide is something that we need to get better at. And frankly, there's a lot of people who are like, just believe me, even for things that you would advocate, right? Clean water, clean air, clean energy, electrification, all these great things. There are a lot of people who are like, don't speak against it. And so my reaction is that's never the right answer. If you're squashing discussion, that's never the right answer. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Because it sure is efficient to just, you know, roll over people. Like, look how many trains China built, right? But I think it's worth navigating. I think it's worth calling out and navigating. That's all I can do.
Right. Thank you. In the interest of time, we will wrap up, but you can reach out to Dr. Bond later and if you have any questions. Thank you.